Warning: this video contains information and scenes that may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the history of true crime. Today, the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway, is going under the microscope. Born February 18, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah, the second of three sons, born to parents Mary and Thomas. Ridgway had a somewhat troubled childhood, a volatile relationship between his parents. His mother, described as a domineering woman, would initiate violent fights between her and Thomas, who himself would complain about sex workers in the town as he drove the bus route each day. Ridgway was held back in school due to having dyslexia. He also had a bedwetting problem until the age of 13. Each occasion that he would wet himself, his mother would wash his genitals, causing Ridgway to form conflicting feelings of anger and arousal toward his mother. At 16, Ridgway stabbed a 6-year-old boy in the woods, stabbing through his ribs and into the boy's liver. Fortunately, the boy survived, but this moment would be pivotal for Ridgway. After graduating from Tye High School, Ridgway and his high school girlfriend Claudia got married, and he joined the Navy. The marriage was short-lived, divorcing after just a year due to Ridgway's habits of seeking out the services of sex workers whilst he was deployed overseas. This frequent activity led to him contracting gonorrhea, but he continued in his endeavors without protection or treatment. After his first marriage ended, Ridgway married Marcia Winslow, and the two had a son in 1975. It is reported that Ridgway became oddly religious during his second marriage, often reading from the Bible, crying afterwards, and insisting that his family follow the strict teachings of their pastor. Despite his newfound faith, Ridgway was violent towards Marcia and had even put her in a chokehold. The marriage broke down, much like the first, due to infidelity. Of his 3 wives, each claimed that Ridgway had an insatiable need for intercourse and would ask them multiple times a day, requesting it in public places and in some cases, where his later victims' bodies would be found, all while still seeking out the services of sex workers. Operating throughout the 1980s, Ridgway was known to target teenage girls and young women. It is suspected that he murdered at least 71 people during this time. Ridgway would approach his next victim, often showing them a photo of his young son in order to gain their trust. He would later take them to engage in intercourse with him, having sex with them from behind for just a few minutes before wrapping his forearm around their necks and using his other to pull back as hard as possible, strangling the young women to death. The majority of his victims were likely killed in secluded areas, his truck, and even in his own home. Many of the bodies were dumped, posed in clusters around the Green River area. However, at least 2 of the bodies were transported to Oregon, supposedly to confuse police looking into the deaths. Ridgway would sometimes return to the dump sites to have intercourse with the corpses. He later explained that necrophilia was not necessarily more exciting to him, but it reduced the likelihood of him getting caught as he would not need to find a new victim. Many of the bodies that Ridgway disposed of were not found until they were only skeletal remains. This has left 2 of his victims still unidentified. In the early 80s, investigations into the murders began. 2 of the task force members, Capel and Reichert, regularly interviewed the incarcerated Ted Bundy, who was able to offer some insight into the mind of this twisted killer. Bundy stated that it was likely the murderer was coming back to have sex with the bodies. He was correct. He insisted that any fresh graves found by the police should be staked out in order to catch the Green River Killer. Ridgway was arrested in relation to prostitution charges in 1982 and again in 2001. He became a suspect in the killings around 1983. However, when asked to take a polygraph test in 1984, he passed. A year later, he began dating Judith Mawson, who in 1988 would become the 3rd wife of Gary Ridgway. During an interview, she noted that when moving in with Ridgway, that there was no carpet in the house. Detectives would speculate that Ridgway had used the carpet to wrap and transport the bodies of his victims. Ridgway confirmed that the number of victims dropped massively when he married Judith, only killing 3 people after their marriage, in comparison to the at least 45 he had killed prior. Hair and saliva samples that had been collected from Ridgway in 1987 were subjected to DNA profiling. This supplied enough evidence to gain an arrest warrant. On November 5, 2003, Ridgway entered a guilty plea for 48 charges of aggravated first-degree murder. This plea bargain would save him facing the death penalty if he aided in locating the remains of his other victims. December 18, 2003, Ridgway received 48 life sentences, plus 10 years for each of the 48 victims for tampering with evidence. Another life sentence was later added when the remains of a 49th victim was found.
And Mr. Ridgway, is it your desire to plead guilty to the 48 charges of aggravated murder in the first degree because you believe that you are guilty of each of those offenses.
Each life sentence is set to be served consecutively without chance of parole. The Green River Killer had admitted to killing at least 71 people, however the remains cannot be found. Ridgway was transported to Washington State Penitentiary to be easily accessible for open murder investigation. Ridgway stated that murdering young women was his career, but it is safe to say that career is over. If you liked this video and want to find out more, click the link in the description to access our #1 source of information. Like and subscribe to be the first to see our next video. Do you have a story you would like to hear on our channel? Comment down below to hear your favorite true crime stories.